KaraokeBooks.
Ulysses. James Joyce. Audiobook. Chapter 8. Pineapple Rock, Lemon Platt, Butterscotch. A sugar-sticky girl shoveling scoopfuls of creams for a Christian brother. Some school treat. Bad for their tummies. Lozenge and comfit manufacturer to His Majesty the King. God. Save. R. Sitting on his throne sucking red jujubes white. A somber Y. M. C. A. Young man, watchful among the warm sweet fumes of Graham lemons, placed a throwaway in a hand of Mr. Stately. Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Bloom. Heart-to-heart talks. Blue. Me? No. Blood of the Lamb." His slow feet walked him riverward, reading. "Are you saved? All are washed in the blood of the Lamb. God wants blood victim. Birth, hymen, martyr, war, foundation of a building, sacrifice, kidney burnt offering, druids' altars. Elijah is coming. Dr. John Alexander Dowie, restorer of the church in Zion, is coming. Is coming. Is coming. Is coming. All heartily welcome. Paying game. Tory and Alexander last year. Polygamy. His wife will put the stopper on that. Where was that ad? Some Birmingham firm. The luminous crucifix. Our Savior. Wake up in the dead of night and see him on the wall, hanging. Pepper's ghost idea. Iron nails ran in. Phosphorus, it must be done with. If you leave a bit of codfish, for instance. I could see the bluey silver over it. Night I went down to the pantry in the kitchen. Don't like all the smells in it waiting to rush out. What was it she wanted? The Malaga raisins. Thinking of Spain. Before Rudy was born. The phosphorescence, that bluey-greeny. Very good for the brain. From Butler's Monument House corner he glanced along Bachelor's Walk. Daedalus' daughter, they're still outside Dillon's auction rooms. Must be selling off some old furniture. Knew her eyes at once from the father. Lobbing about waiting for him. Home always breaks up when the mother goes. 15 children he had. Birth every year almost. That's in their theology, or the priest won't give the poor woman the confession, the absolution. Increase and multiply. Did you ever hear such an idea? Eat you out of house and home. No families themselves to feed. Living on the fat of the land. Their butteries and larders. I'd like to see them do the black fast Yom Kippur. Cross buns. One meal and a collation for fear he'd collapse on the altar. A housekeeper of one of those fellows, if you could pick it out of her. Never pick it out of her. Like getting pound. S. D. Out of him. Does himself well. No guests. All for number 1. Watching his water. Bring your own bread and butter. His reverence, mum's the word. Good Lord, that poor child's dress is in flitters. Underfed she looks too. Potatoes and marge and potatoes. It's after they feel it. Proof of the pudding. Undermines the Constitution. As he set foot on O'Connell Bridge, a puffball of smoke plumed up from the parapet. Brewery barge with export stout. England. Sea air sours it, I heard. Be interesting someday, get a pass through Hancock to see the brewery. Regular world in itself. Vats of porter wonderful. Rats get in too. Drink themselves bloated as big as a collie floating. Dead drunk on the porter. Drink till they puke again like Christians. Imagine drinking that. Rats. Vats. Well, of course, if we knew all the things. Looking down he saw flapping strongly, wheeling between the gaunt quay walls, gulls. Rough weather outside. If I threw myself down? Reuben J's son must have swallowed a good bellyful of that sewage. 1 and 8 too much. HHHHM. It's the droll way he comes out with the things. Knows how to tell a story too. They wheeled lower. Looking for grub. Wait. He threw down among them a crumpled paper ball. Elijah 32 feet per sec is calm. Not a bit. The ball bobbed unheeded on the wake of swells, floated under by the bridge piers. Not such damn fools. Also the day I threw that stale cake out of the Aaron's King picked it up in the wake 50 yards astern. Live by their wits. They wheeled, flapping. The hungry famished gull. Flaps o'er the waters dull. That is how poets write, the similar sounds. But then Shakespeare has no rhymes, blank verse. The flow of the language it is. The thoughts. Solemn. Hamlet, I am thy father's spirit. Doomed for a certain time to walk the earth. 2 apples a penny. 2 for a penny. His gaze passed over the glazed apples serried on her stand. Australians they must be this time of year. Shiny peels. Polishes them up with a rag or a handkerchief. Wait. Those poor birds. He halted again and bought from the old apple woman 2 Banbury cakes for a penny and broke the brittle paste and threw its fragments down into the Liffey. See that? The gulls swooped silently, too, then all from their heights, pouncing on prey. Gone. Every morsel. Aware of their greed and cunning, he shook the powdery crumb from his hands. They never expected that. Manna. Live on fish, fishy flesh they have, all seabirds, gulls, seagoose. Swans from Anna Liffey swim down here sometimes to preen themselves. No accounting for tastes. Wonder what kind is swan meat. Robinson Crusoe had to live on them. They wheeled flapping weakly. I'm not going to throw any more. Penny quite enough. Lot of thanks I get. Not even a caw. They spread foot and mouth disease too. If you cram a turkey say on chestnut meal it tastes like that. Eat pig like pig. But then why is it that saltwater fish are not salty? How is that? His eyes sought answer from the river and saw a rowboat rock at anchor on the treacly swells lazily its plastered board. Kino's. 11. Trousers. Good idea that. Wonder if he pays rent to the corporation. How can you own water really? It's always flowing in a stream, never the same, which in the stream of life we trace. Because life is a stream. All kinds of places are good for ads. That quack doctor for the clap used to be stuck up in all the greenhouses. Never see it now. Strictly confidential. Dr. High Franks. Didn't cost him a red like Magini the Dancing Master self-advertisement. Got fellows to stick them up or stick them up himself for that matter on the queue. T. Running in to loosen a button. Fly-by night. Just the place too. Post no bills. Post 110 pills. Some chap with a dose burning him. If he. Oh. Eh? No. No. No, no. I don't believe it. He wouldn't surely? No, no. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom moved forward, raising his troubled eyes. Think no more about that. After 1. Time ball on the ballast office is down. Dunsink time. Fascinating little book that is of Sir Robert Ball's. Parallax. I never exactly understood. There's a priest. Could ask him. It's Greek. Parallel, parallax. Met him pike hoses she called it till I told her about the transmigration. Oh rocks. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom smiled rocks at 2 windows of the ballast office. She's right after all. Only big words for ordinary things on account of the sound. She's not exactly witty. Can be rude too. Blurt out what I was thinking. Still, I don't know. She used to say Ben Dollard had a bass baritone voice. He has legs like barrels and you'd think he was singing into a barrel. Now, isn't that wit? They used to call him Big Ben. Not half as witty as calling him bass baritone. Appetite like an albatross. Get outside of a baron of beef. Powerful man he was at stowing away number 1 bass. Barrel of bass. See? It all works out. A procession of white-smocked sandwichmen marched slowly towards him along the gutter, scarlet sashes across their boards. Bargains. Like that priest there this morning, we have sinned, we have suffered. He read the scarlet letters on their 5 tall white hats, H. E. L. Y. S. Wisdom Hellies. Y lagging behind drew a chunk of bread from under his foreboard, crammed it into his mouth and munched as he walked. Our staple food. 3 bob a day, walking along the gutters, street after street. Just keep skin and bone together, bread and skilly. They are not Boyle, no, McGlade's men. Doesn't bring in any business either. I suggested to him about a transparent show cart with 2 smart girls sitting inside writing letters, copybooks, envelopes, blotting paper. I bet that would have caught on. Smart girls writing something catch the eye at once. Everyone dying to know what she's writing. Get 20 of them round you if you stare at nothing. Have a finger in the pie. Women too. Curiosity. Pillar of salt. Wouldn't have it of course because he didn't think of it himself first. Or the ink bottle I suggested with a false stain of black celluloid. His ideas for ads like Plumtree's potted under the obituaries, cold meat department. You can't lick 'em. What? Our envelopes. Hello, Jones, where are you going? Can't stop, Robinson, I am hastening to purchase the only reliable ink eraser cancel, sold by Helly's Limited, 85 Dame Street. Well out of that ruck I am. Devil of a job it was collecting accounts of those convents. Tranquilla Convent. That was a nice nun there, really sweet face. Wimple suited her small head. Sister? Sister? I am sure she was crossed in love by her eyes. Very hard to bargain with that sort of a woman. I disturbed her at her devotions that morning. But glad to communicate with the outside world. Our great day, she said. Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. Sweet name too, Caramel. She knew I think she knew by the way she. If she had married she would have changed. I suppose they really were short of money. Fried everything in the best butter all the same. No lard for them. My heart's broke eating dripping. They like buttering themselves in and out. Molly tasting it, her veil up. Sister? Pat Claffey, the pawnbroker's daughter. It was a nun they say invented barbed wire. He crossed Westmoreland Street when ''S had plodded by. Rover Cycle Shop. Those races are on today. How long ago is that? Year Phil Gilligan died. We were in Lombard Street West. Wait, was in Tom's. Got the job in Wisdom Helly's year we married. 6 years. 10 years ago, 94 he died. Yes, that's right, the big fire at Arnott's. Val Dillon was Lord Mayor. The Glen Cree dinner. Alderman Robert O'Reilly emptying the port into his soup before the flag fell. Bob lapping it for the inner alderman. Couldn't hear what the band played. For what we have already received may the Lord make us. Millie was a kiddie then. Molly had that elephant gray dress with the braided frogs. Man-tailored with self-covered buttons. She didn't like it because I sprained my ankle first day she wore choir picnic at the Sugarloaf. As if that. Old Goodwin's tall hat done up with some sticky stuff. Fly's picnic too. Never put a dress on her back like it. Fitted her like a glove, shoulders and hips. Just beginning to plump it out well. Rabbit pie we had that day. People looking after her. Happy. Happier than. Snug little room that was with the red wallpaper. Dockrell's 1 and 9pence a dozen. Millie's tubbing night. American soap I bought, elderflower. Cozy smell of her bathwater. Funny she looked soaked all over. Shapely too. Now photography. Poor Papa's daguerreotype atelier he told me of. Hereditary taste. He walked along the curbstone. Stream of life. What was the name of that priesty-looking chap was always squinting in when he passed? Weak eyes, woman. Stopped in Citron St. Kevin's parade. Pen something. Pendennis? My memory is getting. Pen. Of course it's years ago. Noise of the trams probably. Well, if he couldn't remember the dayfather's name that he sees every day. Bartell Darcy was the tenor, just coming out then. Seeing her home after practice. Conceited fellow with his waxed-up mustache. Gave her that song Winds That Blow from the South. Windy night that was I went to fetch her. There was that lodge meeting on about those lottery tickets after Goodwin's concert in the supper room or oak room of the mansion house. He and I behind. Sheet of her music blew out of my hand against the high school railings. Lucky it didn't. Thing like that spoils the effect of a night for her. Professor Goodwin linking her in front. Shaky on his pins, poor old sot. His farewell concerts. Positively last appearance on any stage. Maybe for months and maybe for never. Remember her laughing at the wind, her blizzard collar up. Corner of Harcourt Road, remember that gust. Burfoo. Blew up all her skirts and her boa nearly smothered old Goodwin. She did get flushed in the wind. Remember when we got home raking up the fire and frying up those pieces of lap of mutton for her supper with the chutney sauce she liked. And the mulled rum. Could see her in the bedroom from the hearth unclamping the busk of her stays, white. Swish and soft flop her stays made on the bed. Always warm from her. Always liked to let herself out. Sitting there after till near 2 taking out her hairpins. Millie tucked up in Betty house. Happy. Happy. That was the night. Oh, Mr. Stately. Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Bloom, how do you do?" "Oh, how do you do, Mrs. Stately?" Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Breen? No use complaining. How is Molly those times? Haven't seen her for ages." In the pink, Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom said gaily. "Millie has a position down in Mullingar, you know. Go away. Isn't that grand for her?" "Yes. In a photographer's there. Getting on like a house on fire. How are all your charges?" "All on the baker's list." Mrs. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Breen said. "How many has she?" "No other in sight." "You're in black, I see. You have no." "No." Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom said. "I have just come from a funeral. Going to crop up all day, I foresee." "Who's dead, when and what did he die of?" "Turn up like a bad penny." "Oh, dear me." Mrs. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Breen said. "I hope it wasn't any near relation. May as well get her sympathy." "Dignam." Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom said. "An old friend of mine. He died quite suddenly, poor fellow. Heart trouble, I believe. Funeral was this morning. Your funeral's tomorrow. While you're coming through the rye. Diddle-diddle-dum-dum. Diddle-diddle. Sad to lose the old friends." Mrs. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Breen's woman eyes said melancholily. "Now that's quite enough about that. Just, quietly, husband. And your lord and master?" Mrs. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Breen turned up her two large eyes. "Hasn't lost them anyhow." "Oh, don't be talking," she said. "He's a caution to rattlesnakes. He's in there now with his law books finding out the law of libel. He has me heart scalded. Wait till I show you." Hot mock turtle vapor and steam of new-baked jam puffs roll-a-polly poured out from Harrison's. The heavy noonreek tickled the top of Mr. Stately. Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom's gullet. "Want to make good pastry, butter, best flour, demerara sugar, or they'd taste it with the hot tea. Or is it from her?" A barefoot Arab stood over the grating, breathing in the fumes. Deaden the gnaw of hunger that way. Pleasure or pain is it? Penny dinner. Knife and fork chained to the table. Opening her handbag, chipped leather. Hatpin. Ought to have a guard on those things. Stick it in a chap's eye in the tram. Rummaging. Open. Money. Please take one. Devils if they lose 6p. Raise Cain. Husband barging. Where's the 10 shillings I gave you on Monday? Are you feeding your little brother's family? Soiled handkerchief, medicine bottle. Pastille that was fell. What is she? There must be a new moon out, she said. He's always bad then. Do you know what he did last night? Her hand ceased to rummage. Her eyes fixed themselves on him, wide in alarm, yet smiling. What? Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom asked. Let her speak. Look straight in her eyes. I believe you. Trust me. Woke me up in the night, she said. Dream he had, a nightmare. Indiges. Said the ace of spades was walking up the stairs. The ace of spades. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom said. She took a folded postcard from her handbag. Read that, she said. He got it this morning. What is it? Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom asked, taking the card. U. P. U. P. Up, she said. Someone taking a rise out of him. It's a great shame for them whoever he is. Indeed it is, Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom said. She took back the card, sighing. And now he's going round to Mr. Stately. Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Menton's office. He's going to take an action for £10,000, he says. She folded the card into her untidy bag and snapped the catch. Same blue serge dress she had 2 years ago, the nap bleaching. Seen its best days. Wispish hair over her ears. And that dowdy toque, 3 old grapes to take the harm out of it. Shabby genteel. She used to be a tasty dresser. Lines round her mouth. Only a year or so older than Molly. See the eye that woman gave her, passing. Cruel. The unfair sex. He looked still at her, holding back behind his look his discontent. Pungent mock turtle oxtail mulligatawny. I'm hungry too. Flakes of pastry on the gusset of her dress, daub of sugary flour stuck to her cheek. Rhubarb tart with liberal fillings, rich fruit interior. Josie Powell that was. In Luke Doyle's Long Ago. Dolphin's Barn, the charades. U. P. Up. Change the subject. "Do you ever see anything of Mrs. Stately?" Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Beaufoy?" Mr. Stately, Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom asked. "Mina Purefoy?" She said. "Philip Beaufoy, I was thinking. Playgoers Club. Matcham often thinks of the masterstroke. Did I pull the chain?" "Yes." "The last act?" "Yes. I just called to ask on the way in, is she over it?" "She's in the lying-in hospital in Hollis Street. Dr. Horn got her in. She's 3 days bad now." "Oh." Mr. Stately, Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom said. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Yes." Mrs. Stately, Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Breen said. "And a house full of kids at home. It's a very stiff berth, the nurse told me." "Oh." Mr. Stately, Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom said. His heavy pitying gaze absorbed her news. His tongue clacked in compassion. 500th. 500th. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said. "Poor thing. 3 days. That's terrible for her." Mrs. Stately, Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Breen nodded. "She was taken bad on the Tuesday." Mr. Stately, Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom touched her funny bone gently, warning her. "Mind. Let this man pass." A bony form strode along the curbstone from the river, staring with a rapt gaze into the sunlight through a heavy stringed glass. Tight as a skullpiece, a tiny hat gripped his head. From his arm a folded dustcoat, a stick and an umbrella dangled to his stride. "Watch him." Mr. Stately, Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom said. "He always walks outside the lampposts. Watch. Who is he, if it's a fair question?" Mrs. Stately, Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Breen asked. "Is he Dotty?" "His name is Cashel Boyle O'Connor Fitzmaurice Tisdall Farrell." Mr. Stately, Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom said smiling. Watch. He has enough of them, she said. Dennis will be like that one of these days. She broke off suddenly. There he is, she said. I must go after him. Goodbye. Remember me to Molly, won't you? I will, Mr. Stately. Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom said. He watched her dodge through passers towards the shop fronts. Dennis Breen in skimpy frock coat and blue canvas shoes shuffled out of Harrison's, hugging two heavy tomes to his ribs. Blown in from the bay. Like old times. He suffered her to overtake him without surprise and thrust his dull gray beard towards her, his loose jaw wagging as he spoke earnestly. Meshuggah. Off his chump. Mr. Stately. Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom walked on again easily, seeing ahead of him in sunlight the tight skullpiece, the dangling stick umbrella dust coat. Going the 2 days. Watch him. Out he goes again. One way of getting on in the world. And that other old mosey lunatic in those duds. Hard time she must have with him. Up. I'll take my oath that's Alf Bergen or Richie Goulding. Wrote it for a lark in the Scotch house, I bet anything. Round to Menton's office. His oyster eyes staring at the postcard. Be a feast for the gods. He passed the Irish Times. There might be other answers lying there. Like to answer them all. Good system for criminals. Code. At their lunch now. Clerk with the glasses there doesn't know me. Oh, leave them there to simmer. Enough bother wading through 44 of them. Wanted, smart lady typist to aid gentlemen in literary work. I called you naughty darling because I do not like that other world. Please tell me what is the meaning. Please tell me what perfume does your wife. Tell me who made the world. The way they spring those questions on you. And the other one, Lizzie Twigg. My literary efforts have had the good fortune to meet with the approval of the eminent poet A.E. Mr. Stately. Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Geo. Russell. No time to do her hair, drinking sloppy tea with a book of poetry. Best paper by long chalks for a small ad. Got the provinces now. Cook and general, X. Cuisine, housemaid kept. Wanted live man for spirit counter. Resp. Girl, RC, wishes to hear of post in fruit or pork shop. James Carlyle made that. 6.5% dividend. Made a big deal on Coates's shares. Canny. Cunning old Scotch hunks. All the toady news. Our gracious and popular vicereign. Bought the Irish field now. Lady Mountcashel has quite recovered after her confinement and rode out with the Ward Union staghounds at the enlargement yesterday at Rathoath. Uneatable fox. Pot hunters too. Fear injects juices, make it tender enough for them. Riding astride. Sit her horse like a man. Weight-carrying huntress. No side saddle or pillion for her, not for Joe. First to the meet and in at the death. Strong as a brood mare, some of those horsey women. Swagger around livery stables. Toss off a glass of brandy neat while you'd say knife. That one at the Grosvenor this morning. Up with her on the car, wish swish. Stone wall or 5-barred gate, put her mount to it. Think that pug-nosed driver did it out of spite. Who is this she was like? Oh yes. Mrs. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Miriam Dandrade that sold me her old wraps and black underclothes in the Shelburne Hotel. Divorced Spanish-American. Didn't take a feather out of her my handling them. As if I was her clothes horse. Saw her in the vice-regal party when Stubbs the park ranger got me in with Whalen of the Express. Scavenging what the quality left. High tea. Mayonnaise I poured on the plums thinking it was custard. Her ears ought to have tingled for a few weeks after. Want to be a bull for her. Born courtesan. No nursery work for her, thanks." Poor Mrs. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Purefoy. Methodist husband. Method in his madness. Saffron bun and milk and soda lunch in the educational dairy. Y. M. C. A. Eating with a stopwatch, 32 chews to the minute. And still his mutton chop whiskers grew. Supposed to be well connected. Theodore's cousin in Dublin Castle. One Tony relative in every family. Hearty annuals he presents her with. Saw him out at the Three Jolly Toppers marching along bareheaded and his eldest boy carrying one in a market net. The squallers. Poor thing. Then having to give the breast year after year all hours of the night. Selfish those teas are. Dog in the manger. Only 1 lump of sugar in my tea, if you please." He stood at Fleet Street crossing. Luncheon interval. A 6-penny at Rose? Must look up that ad in the National Library. An 8-penny in the Burton. Better. On my way. He walked on past Bolton's Westmoreland house. Tea. I forgot to tap Tom Kernan. SS's. 500th, DTH. 3 days. Imagine groaning on a bed with a vinegared handkerchief round her forehead, her belly swollen out. Phew. Dreadful simply. Child's head too big, forceps. Doubled up inside her trying to butt its way out blindly, groping for the way out. Kill me that would. Lucky Molly got over hers lightly. They ought to invent something to stop that. Life with hard labor. Twilight sleep idea. Queen Victoria was given that. 9 she had. A good layer. Old woman that lived in a shoe she had so many children. Suppose he was consumptive. Time someone thought about it instead of gassing about the the pensive bosom of the silver effulgence. Flapdoodle to feed fools on. They could easily have big establishments, whole thing quite painless out of all the taxes, give every child born 5 quid at compound interest up to 21.5% is 100 shillings and 5 tiresome pounds multiply by 20 decimal system, encourage people to put by money, save 110 and a bit, 21 years want to work it out on paper, come to a tidy sum more than you think. Not stillborn, of course. They are not even registered. Trouble for nothing. Funny sight, 2 of them together, their bellies out. Molly and Mrs. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Morsel." Mother's meeting. Thesis retires for the time being, then returns. How flat they look all of a sudden after. Peaceful eyes. Weight off their mind. Old Mrs. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Thornton was a jolly old soul." "All my babies," she said. The spoon of pap in her mouth before she fed them. "Oh, that's Nyum. Got her hand crushed by old Tom Wall's son. His first bow to the public. Head like a prize pumpkin. Snuffy Dr. Murrin. People knocking them up at all hours. For God, sake, doctor. Wife in her throes. Then keep them waiting months for their fee. To attendance on your wife. No gratitude in people. Humane doctors, most of them. Before the huge high door of the Irish House of Parliament a flock of pigeons flew. Their little frolic after meals. Who will we do it on? I pick the fellow in black. Here goes. Here's good luck. Must be thrilling from the air. Apjohn, myself and Owen Goldberg up in the trees near Goose Green playing the monkeys. Mackerel they called me. A squad of constables debouched from College Street, marching in Indian file. Goose step. Food-heated faces, sweating helmets, patting their truncheons. After their feed with a good load of fat soup under their belts. Policeman's lot is oft a happy one. They split up in groups and scattered, saluting, towards their beats. Let out to graze. Best moment to attack one in pudding time. A punch in his dinner. A squad of others, marching irregularly, rounded Trinity railings making for the station. Bound for their troughs. Prepare to receive cavalry. Prepare to receive soup. He crossed under Tommy Moore's roguish finger. They did right to put him up over a urinal, meeting of the waters. Ought to be places for women. Running into cake shops. Settle my hat straight, there is not in this wide world a valley. Great song of Julia Morkins. Kept her voice up to the very last. Pupil of Michael Balfe's, wasn't she? He gazed after the last broad tunic. Nasty customers to tackle. Jack Power could a tale unfold, father a G-man. If a fellow gave them trouble being lagged they let him have it hot and heavy in the bridewell. Can't blame them after all with the job they have, especially the young hornies. That horse policeman the day Joe Chamberlain was given his degree in Trinity he got a run for his money. My word he did. His horse's hoofs clattering after us down Abbey Street. Lucky I had the presence of mind to dive into Manning's or I was souped. He did come a wallop, by George. Must have cracked his skull on the cobblestones. I oughtn't to have got myself swept along with those medicals. And the Trinity jibs in their mortarboards. Looking for trouble. Still I got to know that young Dixon who dressed that sting for me in the Mater, and now he's in Hollis Street where Mrs. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Purefoy." Wheels within wheels. Police whistle in my ears still. All skedaddled. Why he fixed on me. Give me in charge. Right here it began. Up the Boers. 3 cheers for DeWitt. We'll hang Joe Chamberlain on a soreapple tree. Silly billies. Mob of young cubs yelling their guts out. Vinegar Hill. The butter exchange band. Few years' time half of them magistrates and civil servants. War comes on, into the army helter-skelter, same fellows used to. Whether on the scaffold high. Never know who you're talking to. Corny Kelleher, he has Harvey Duff in his eye. Like that Peter or Dennis or James Carey that blew the gaff on the Invincibles. Member of the corporation too. Egging raw youths on to get in the know all the time, drawing Secret Service pay from the castle. Drop him like a hot potato. Why those plainclothes men are always courting slaveys. Easily twig a man used to uniform. Square pushing up against a back door. Maul her a bit. Then the next thing on the menu. And who is the gentleman does be visiting there? Was the young master saying anything? Peeping Tom through the keyhole. Decoy duck. Hot-blooded young student fooling round her fat arms ironing. Are those yours, Mary? I don't wear such things. Stop or I'll tell the missus on you. Out half the night. There are great times coming, Mary. Wait till you see. Ah, Geelong with your great times coming. Barmaids too. Tobacco shop girls. James Stephen's idea was the best. He knew them. Circles of 10 so that a fellow couldn't round on more than his own ring. Sinn Fein. Back out you get the knife. Hidden hand. Stay in. The firing squad. Turnkey's daughter got him out of Richmond, off from Lusk. Putting up in the Buckingham Palace Hotel under their very noses. Garibaldi. You must have a certain fascination, Harnell. Arthur Griffith is a square-headed fellow, but he has no go in him for the mob. Or gas about our lovely land. Gammon and spinach. Dublin Bakery Company's tea room. Debating societies. That republicanism is the best form of government. That the language question should take precedence of the economic question. Have your daughters inveigling them to your house. Stuff them up with meat and drink. Michaelmas goose. Here's a good lump of thyme seasoning under the apron for you. Have another quart of goose grease before it gets too cold. Halft enthusiasts. Penny roll and a walk with the band. No grace for the carver. The thought that the other chap pays best sauce in the world. Make themselves thoroughly at home. Show us over those apricots, meaning peaches. The not far distant day. Home rule sun rising up in the northwest. His smile faded as he walked, a heavy cloud hiding the sun slowly, shadowing Trinity's surly front. Trams passed one another, ingoing, outgoing, clanging. Useless words. Things go on same, day after day. Squads of police marching out, back, trams in, out. Those two loonies mooching about. Dignam carted off. Mina Purefoy swollen belly on a bed groaning to have a child tugged out of her. One born every second somewhere. Other dying every second. Since I fed the birds 5 minutes. 300 kicked the bucket. Other 300 born, washing the blood off, all are washed in the blood of the lamb, bawling ma. Cityful passing away, other cityful coming, passing away too, other coming on, passing on. Houses, lines of houses, streets, miles of pavements, piled up bricks, stones. Changing hands. This owner, that. Landlord never dies, they say. Other steps into his shoes when he gets his notice to quit. They buy the place up with gold and still they have all the gold. Swindle in it somewhere. Piled up in cities, worn away age after age. Pyramids in sand. Built on bread and onions. Slaves' Chinese wall. Babylon. Big stones left. Round towers. Rest rubble, sprawling suburbs, Jerry built. Kerwin's mushroom houses built a breeze. Shelter, for the night. No one is anything. This is the very worst hour of the day. Vitality. Dull, gloomy. Hate this hour. Feel as if I had been eaten and spewed. Provost's house. The Reverend Dr. Salmon, tinned salmon. Well tinned in there. Like a mortuary chapel. Wouldn't live in it if they paid me. Hope they have liver and bacon today. Nature abhors a vacuum. The sun freed itself slowly and lit glints of light among the silverware opposite in Walter Sexton's window by which John Howard Parnell passed, unseeing. There he is, the brother. Image of him. Haunting face. Now that's a coincidence. Course hundreds of times you think of a person and don't meet him. Like a man walking in his sleep. No one knows him. Must be a corporation meeting today. They say he never put on the city marshal's uniform since he got the job. Charlie Kavanagh used to come out on his high horse, cocked hat, puffed, powdered and shaved. Look at the woebegone walk of him. Eaten a bad egg. Poached eyes on ghost. I have a pain. Great man's brother, his brother's brother. He'd look nice on the city charger. Drop into the DBC. Probably for his coffee, play chess there. His brother used men as pawns. Let them all go to pot. Afraid to pass a remark on him. Freeze them up with that eye of his. That's the fascination, the name. All a bit touched. Mad Fanny and his other sister Mrs. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Dickinson driving about with scarlet harness. Bolt upright like Surgeon Merdle. Still David Sheehy beat him for South Meath. Apply for the Chiltern Hundreds and retire into public life. The Patriots' Banquet. Eating orange peels in the park. Simon Dedalus said when they put him in Parliament that Parnell would come back from the grave and lead him out of the House of Commons by the arm. Of the two-headed octopus, one of whose heads is the head upon which the ends of the world have forgotten to come while the other speaks with a Scotch accent. The tentacles. They passed from behind Mr. Stately. Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom along the curbstone. Beard and bicycle. Young woman. And there he is too. Now that's really a coincidence, second time. Coming events cast their shadows before. With the approval of the eminent poet, Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Geo. Russell. That might be Lizzie Twigg with him. A. E. What does that mean? Initials perhaps. Albert Edward, Arthur Edmund, Alphonsus E. Flat Ed L. Esquire. What was he saying? The ends of the world with a Scotch accent. Tentacles, octopus. Something occult, symbolism. Holding forth. She's taking it all in. Not saying a word. To aid gentlemen in literary work. His eyes followed the high figure in homespun, beard and bicycle, a listening woman at his side. Coming from the vegetarian. Only wedge bobbles and fruit. Don't eat a beefsteak. If you do, the eyes of that cow will pursue you through all eternity. They say it's healthier. Wind and watery though. Tried it. Keep you on the run all day. Bad as a bloater. Dreams all night. Why do they call that thing they gave me nutsteak? Nutarians. Fruitarians. To give you the idea you are eating rump steak. Absurd. Salty too. They cook in soda. Keep you sitting by the tap all night. Her stockings are loose over her ankles. I detest that. So tasteless. Those literary ethereal people, they are all dreamy, cloudy, symbolistic. Aesthetes they are. I wouldn't be surprised if it was that kind of food you see produces the like waves of the brain, the poetical. For example, one of those policemen sweating Irish stew into their shirts, you couldn't squeeze a line of poetry out of him. Don't know what poetry is even. Must be in a certain mood. The dreamy cloudy gull. Waves o'er the waters dull. He crossed at Nassau Street corner and stood before the window of Yates and Son, pricing the field glasses. Or will I drop into Old Harris and have a chat with young Sinclair? Well-mannered fellow. Probably at his lunch. Must get those old glasses of mine set right. Gore's lenses 6 guineas. Germans making their way everywhere. Sell on easy terms to capture trade. Undercutting. Might chance on a pair in the railway lost property office. Astonishing the things people leave behind them in trains and cloakrooms. What do they be thinking about? Women too. Incredible. Last year traveling to Ennis had to pick up that farmer's daughter's bag and hand it to her at Limerick Junction. Unclaimed money too. There's a little watch up there on the roof of the bank to test those glasses by. His lids came down on the lower rims of his irides. Can't see it. If you imagine it's there you can almost see it. Can't see it. He faced about and, standing between the awnings, held out his right hand at arm's length towards the sun. Wanted to try that often. Yes, completely. The tip of his little finger blotted out the sun's disk. Must be the focus where the rays cross. If I had black glasses. Interesting. There was a lot of talk about those sunspots when we were in Lombard Street West. Looking up from the back garden. Terrific explosions they are. There will be a total eclipse this year, autumn sometime. Now that I come to think of it, that ball falls at Greenwich time. The clock is worked by an electric wire from Dunsink. Must go out there some first Saturday of the month. If I could get an introduction to Professor Joly or learn up something about his family. That would do too. Man always feels complimented. Flattery where least expected. Nobleman proud to be descended from some king's mistress. His foremother. Lay it on with a trowel. Cap in hand goes through the land. Not go in and blurt out what you know you're not to. What's parallax? Show this gentleman the door. Ah. His hand fell to his side again. Never know anything about it. Waste of time. Gas balls spinning about, crossing each other, passing. Same old ding-dong always. Gas. Then solid. Then world. Then cold. Then dead shell drifting around, frozen rock, like that pineapple rock. The moon. Must be a new moon out, she said. I believe there is. He went on by La Maison Claire. Wait. The full moon was the night we were Sunday fortnight exactly. There is a new moon. Walking down by the Tolka. Not bad for a Fairview moon. She was humming. The young May moon, she's beaming, love. He other side of her. Elbow, arm. He. Glowworm's lamp is gleaming, love. Touch. Fingers. Asking. Answer. Yes. Stop. Stop. If it was, it was. Must. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Bloom, quick breathing, slowlier walking past Adam Court." With a keep quiet relief his eyes took note, "This is the street here, middle of the day of Bob Doran's bottle shoulders." On his annual bend, McCoy said, "They drink in order to say or do something or chercher la femme. Up in the coombe with chummies and streetwalkers, and then the rest of the year sober as a judge." Yes. Thought so. Sloping into the Empire. Gone. Plain soda would do him good. Where Pat Kinsella had his harp theater before Whitbread ran the Queen's. Broth of a boy. Dion Boucicault business with his Harvest Moon face in a pokey bonnet. 3 purty maids from school. How time flies, eh? Showing long red pantaloons under his skirts. Drinkers, drinking, laughed spluttering, their drink against their breath. More power, Pat. Coarse red. Fun for drunkards, guffaw and smoke. Take off that white hat. His parboiled eyes. Where is he now? Beggar somewhere. The harp that once did starve us all. I was happier then. Or was that I? Or am I now I? 28 I was. She 23. When we left Lombard Street West something changed. Could never like it again after Rudy. Can't bring back time. Like holding water in your hand. Would you go back to then? Just beginning then. Would you? Are you not happy in your home, you poor little naughty boy? Wants to sew on buttons for me. I must answer. Write it in the library. Grafton Street gay with housed awnings lured his senses. Muslin prints, silk dames and dowagers, jingle of harnesses, hoofed hoods low-ringing in the baking causeway. Thick feet that woman has in the white stockings. Hope the rain mucks them up on her. Country-bred chawbacon. All the beef to the heels were in. Always gives a woman clumsy feet. Molly looks out of plum. He passed, dallying, the windows of Brown Thomas, silk mercers. Cascades of ribbons. Flimsy china silks. A tilted urn poured from its mouth a flood of blood-hued poplin, lustrous blood. The Huguenots brought that here. La Casa e Santa, Terra Terra. Great chorus that. Terry Terra. Must be washed in rainwater. Meyerbeer. Terra. Bomb bomb bomb. Pincushions. I'm a long time threatening to buy one. Sticking them all over the place. Needles in window curtains. He bared slightly his left forearm. Scrape. Nearly gone. Not today anyhow. Must go back for that lotion. For her birthday perhaps. June Juliag September 8th. Nearly 3 months off. Then she mightn't like it. Women won't pick up pins. Say it cuts low. Gleaming silks, petticoats on slim brass rails, rays of flat silk stockings. Useless to go back. Had to be. Tell me all. High voices. Sun-warm silk. Jingling harnesses. All for a woman, home and houses, silk webs, silver, rich fruits spicy from Jaffa. Agendath netium. Wealth of the world. A warm human plumpness settled down on his brain. His brain yielded. Perfume of embraces all him assailed. With hungered flesh obscurely, he mutely craved to adore. Duke Street. Here we are. Must eat. The Burton. Feel better then. He turned Combridge's corner, still pursued. Jingling, hoofed hoods. Perfumed bodies, warm, full. All kissed, yielded, in deep summer fields, tangled pressed grass, in trickling hallways of tenements, along sofas, creaking beds. Jack, love. Darling. Kiss me, Reggie. My boy. Love. His heart astir, he pushed in the door of the Burton restaurant. Stink gripped his trembling breath, pungent meat juice, slush of greens. See the animals feed. Men, men, men. Perched on high stools by the bar, hats shoved back, at the tables calling for more bread no charge, swilling, wolfing gobefuls of sloppy food, their eyes bulging, wiping wetted mustaches. A pallid suet-faced young man polished his tumbler knife fork and spoon with his napkin. New set of microbes. A man with an infant's sauce-stained napkin tucked round him shoveled gurgling soup down his gullet. A man spitting back on his plate, half-masticated gristle. Gums. No teeth to chew it. Chump chop from the grill. Bolting to get it over. Sad boozer's eyes. Bitten off more than he can chew. Am I like that? See ourselves as others see us. Hungry man is an angry man. Working tooth and jaw. Don't. Oh. A bone. That last pagan king of Ireland, Cormac, in the school poem choked himself at Slitty southward of the Boyne. Wonder what he was eating. Something galoptious. St. Patrick converted him to Christianity. Couldn't swallow it all, however. Roast beef and cabbage. One stew. Smells of men. Spat on sawdust, sweetish warmish cigarette smoke, reek of plug, spilt beer, men's beery piss, the stale of ferment. His gorge rose. Couldn't eat a morsel here. Fellow sharpening knife and fork to eat all before him, old chap picking his tootles. Slight spasm, full, chewing the cud. Before and after. Grace after meals. Look on this picture then on that. Scoffing up stew gravy with sopping sippets of bread. Lick it off the plate, man. Get out of this. He gazed round the stooled and tabled eaters, tightening the wings of his nose. 2 stouts here. 1 corned and cabbage. That fellow ramming a knifeful of cabbage down as if his life depended on it. Good stroke. Give me the fidgets to look. Safer to eat from his 3 hands. Tear it limb from limb. Second nature to him. Born with a silver knife in his mouth. That's witty, I think. Or no. Silver means born rich. Born with a knife. But then the illusion is lost. An ill-girt server gathered sticky clattering plates. Rock, the head bailiff, standing at the bar, blew the foamy crown from his tankard. Well up, it splashed yellow near his boot. A diner, knife and fork upright, elbows on table, ready for a second helping, stared towards the food lift across his stained square of newspaper. Other chap telling him something with his mouth full. Sympathetic listener. Table talk. I munched hum unto unchster bunk on munchday. Huh? Did you, Faith? Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom raised 2 fingers doubtfully to his lips. His eyes said, "Not here. Don't see him. Out. I hate dirty eaters." He backed towards the door. Get a light snack in Davy Burns. Stopgap. Keep me going. Had a good breakfast. Roast and mashed here. Pint of stout. Every fellow for his own tooth and nail. Gulp. Grub. Gulp. Gobstuff. He came out into clearer air and turned back towards Grafton Street. Eat or be eaten. Kill. Kill. Suppose that communal kitchen years to come perhaps. All trotting down with porringers and tommy cans to be filled. Devour contents in the street. John Howard Parnell example the provost of Trinity every mother's son don't talk of your provosts and provost of Trinity women and children cabmen priests parsons field marshals archbishops. From Aylesbury Road, Clyde Road, artisans' dwellings, North Dublin Union, Lord Mayor in his gingerbread coach, old Queen in a bath chair. My plate's empty. After you with our incorporated drinking cup. Like Sir Philip Crampton's fountain. Rub off the microbes with your handkerchief. Next chap rubs on a new batch with his. Father O'Flynn would make hares of them all. Have rows all the same. All for number one. Children fighting for the scrapings of the pot. Want a soup pot as big as the Phoenix Park. Harpooning flitches and hindquarters out of it. Hate people all round you. City Arms Hotel table d'hote she called it. Soup, joint and sweet. Never know whose thoughts you're chewing. Then who'd wash up all the plates and forks? Might be all feeding on tabloids that time. Teeth getting worse and worse. After all, there's a lot in that vegetarian fine flavor of things from the earth. Garlic, of course, it stinks after Italian organ grinders, crisp of onions, mushrooms, truffles. Pain to the animal too. Pluck and draw fowl. Wretched brutes there at the cattle market waiting for the poleaxe to split their skulls open. Moo. Poor trembling calves. Met. Staggering bob. Bubble and squeak. Butcher's buckets, wobbly lights. Give us that brisket off the hook. Plup. Rawhead and bloody bones. Flayed glassied sheep hung from their haunches, sheep snouts bloody papered, sniveling nose jam on sawdust. Top and lashers going out. Don't maul them pieces, young one. Hot fresh blood they prescribe for decline. Blood always needed. Insidious. Lick it up smoking hot, thick sugary. Famished ghosts. Ah, I'm hungry. He entered Davy Burns' moral pub. He doesn't chat. Stands a drink now and then. But in leap year once in 4. Cashed a check for me once. What will I take now? He drew his watch. Let me see now. Shandygaff? Hello, Bloom, Nosy Flynn said from his nook. Hello, Flynn. How's things? Tip-top. Let me see. I'll take a glass of Burgundy and... Let me see. Sardines on the shelves. Almost taste them by looking. Sandwich? Ham and his descendants, mustard and bread there. Potted meats. What is home without Plumtree's potted meat? Incomplete. What a stupid ad. Under the obituary notices they stuck it. All up a Plumtree. Dignam's potted meat. Cannibals would with lemon and rice. White missionary too salty. Like pickled pork. Expect the chief consumes the parts of honor. Ought to be tough from exercise. His wives in a row to watch the effect. There was a right royal old nigger. Who ate or something the somethings of the Reverend Mr. Stately. Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Mac Trigger. With it an abode of bliss. Lord knows what concoction. Calls mouldy tripes windpipes faked and minced up. Puzzle find the meat. Kosher. No meat and milk together. Hygiene, that was what they call now. Yom Kippur fast spring cleaning of inside. Peace and war depend on some fellow's digestion. Religions. Christmas turkeys and geese. Slaughter of innocents. Eat, drink and be merry. Then casual wards full after. Heads bandage. Cheese digests all but itself. Mitty cheese. Have you a cheese sandwich? Yes, sir. Like a few olives too if they had them. Italian I prefer. Good glass of Burgundy take away that. Lubricate. A nice salad, cool as a cucumber, Tom Kernan can dress. Puts gusto into it. Pure olive oil. Millie served me that cutlet with a sprig of parsley. Take 1 Spanish onion. God made food, the devil the cooks. Deviled crab. Wife well? Quite well, thanks. A cheese sandwich, then. Gorgonzola, have you? Yes, sir. Nosy Flynn sipped his grog. Doing any singing those times? Look at his mouth. Could whistle in his own ear. Flap ears to match. Music. Knows as much about it as my coachman. Still better tell him. Does no harm. Free ad. She's engaged for a big tour end of this month. You may have heard perhaps. No. Oh, that's the style. Who's getting it up? The curate served. How much is that? 7d, sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom cut his sandwich into slender strips. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Mac Trigger. Easier than the dreamy creamy stuff. His 500 wives. Had the time of their lives. Mustard, sir? Thank you. He studied under each lifted strip yellow blobs. Their lives. I have it. It grew bigger and bigger and bigger. Getting it up? He said. Well, it's like a company idea, you see. Part shares and part profits. Now I remember, Nosy Flynn said, putting his hand in his pocket to scratch his groin. Who is this was telling me? Isn't Blazes Boylan mixed up in it? A warm shock of air heat of mustard hanched on Mr. Stately. Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom's heart. He raised his eyes and met the stare of a bilious clock. 2. Pub clock 5 minutes fast. Time going on. Hands moving. 2. Not yet. His midriff yearned then upward, sank within him, yearned more longingly. Wine. He smell-sipped the cordial juice and, bidding his throat strongly to speed it, set his wineglass delicately down. Yes, he said. He's the organizer in point of fact. No fear, no brains. Nosy Flynn snuffled and scratched. Flea having a good square meal. He had a good slice of luck, Jack Mooney was telling me, over that boxing match Myler Keogh won again that soldier in the Portobello barracks. By God, he had the little kipper down in the County Carlo he was telling me. Hope that dewdrop doesn't come down into his glass. No, snuffled it up. For near a month, man, before it came off. Sucking duck eggs by God till further orders. Keep him off the booze, see? Oh, by God, Blazes is a hairy chap. Davy Byrne came forward from the hind bar in tuck-stitched shirt sleeves, cleaning his lips with 2 wipes of his napkin. Herring's blush. whose smile upon each feature plays with such and such replete. Too much fat on the parsnips. And here's himself and pepper on him, Nosy Flynn said. Can you give us a good one for the Gold Cup? I'm off that. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Flynn," Davy Byrne answered. "I never put anything on a horse." "You're right there," Nosy Flynn said. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom ate his strips of sandwich, fresh clean bread, with relish of disgust pungent mustard, the feety savor of green cheese. Sips of his wine soothed his palate. Not logwood that. Tastes fuller this weather with the chill off. Nice quiet bar. Nice piece of wood in that counter. Nicely planed. Like the way it curves there. I wouldn't do anything at all in that line, Davy Byrne said. It ruined many a man, the same horses. Vintner's sweepstake. Licensed for the sale of beer, wine and spirits for consumption on the premises. Heads I win, tails you lose. True for you, Nosy Flynn said. Unless you're in the know. There's no straight sport going now. Lenihan gets some good ones. He's giving Scepter today. Zinfandel's the favorite, Lord Howard de Walden's, won at Epsom. Morny Cannon is riding him. I could have got 7-1 against Saint Amant a fortnight before. That's so? Davy Byrne said. He went towards the window and, taking up the petty cash book, scanned its pages. I could, faith, Nosy Flynn said, snuffling. That was a rare bit of horseflesh. Saint Frusquin was her sire. She won in a thunderstorm, Rothschild's filly, with wadding in her ears. Blue jacket and yellow cap. Bad luck to Big Ben Dollard and his John O'Gaunt. He put me off it. Aye. He drank resignedly from his tumbler, running his fingers down the flutes. Aye, he said, sighing. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom, champing, standing, looked upon his sigh. Nosy numbskull. Will I tell him that horse Lenihan? He knows already. Better let him forget. Go and lose more. Fool and his money. Dewdrop coming down again. Cold nose he'd have kissing a woman. Still they might like. Prickly beards they like. Dogs cold noses. Old Mrs. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Reardon with the rumbling stomach's Skye Terrier in the City Arms Hotel. Molly fondling him in her lap. Oh, the big doggy bow wowsy wowsy. Wine-soaked and softened rolled pith of bread mustard a moment mockish cheese. Nice wine it is. Tasted better because I'm not thirsty. Bath of course does that. Just a bite or two. Then about 6 o'clock I can. 6. Time will be gone then. She. Mild fire of wine kindled his veins. I wanted that badly. Felt so off color. His eyes unhungrily saw shelves of tins, sardines, gaudy lobsters' claws. All the odd things people pick up for food. Out of shells, periwinkles with a pin, off trees, snails out of the ground the French eat, out of the sea with bait on a hook. Silly fish learn nothing in 1,000 years. If you didn't know, risky putting anything into your mouth. Poisonous berries. Johnny Magories. Roundness you think good. Gaudy color warns you off. One fellow told another, and so on. Try it on the dog first. Led on by the smell or the look. Tempting fruit. Ice cones. Cream. Instinct. Orange groves, for instance. Need artificial irrigation. Bleibtreustrasse. Yes, but what about oysters? Unsightly like a clot of phlegm. Filthy shells. Devil to open them too. Who found them out? Garbage, sewage they feed on. Fizz and red bank oysters. Effect on the sexual. Aphrodis. He was in the red bank this morning. Was he oysters old fish at table, perhaps he young flesh in bed, no June has no ar no oysters. But there are people like things high. Tainted game. Jugged hare. First catch your hare. Chinese eating eggs 50 years old, blue and green again. Dinner of 30 courses. Each dish harmless might mix inside. Idea for a poison mystery. That Archduke Leopold, was it no yes, or was it Otto, one of those Habsburgs? Or who was it used to eat the scruff off his own head? Cheapest lunch in town. Of course aristocrats, then the others copy to be in the fashion. Millie 2 rock oil and flour. Raw pastry I like myself. Half the catch of oysters they throw back in the sea to keep up the price. Cheap no one would buy. Caviar. Do the grand. Hawk in green glasses. Swell blowout. Lady this. Powdered bosom pearls. The elite. Creme de la creme. They want special dishes to pretend they're. Hermit with a platter of pulse keep down the stings of the flesh. No me come eat with me. Royal Sturgeon High Sheriff, coffee, the butcher, right to venisons of the forest from his ex. Send him back the half of a cow. Spread I saw down in the Master of the Rolls kitchen area. White-hatted chef like a rabbi. Combustible duck. Curly cabbage à la Duchesse de Parme. Just as well to write it on the bill of fare so you can know what you've eaten. Too many drugs spoil the broth. I know it myself. Dosing it with Edward's desiccated soup. Geese stuffed silly for them. Lobsters boiled alive. Do P take some ptarmigan? Wouldn't mind being a waiter in a swell hotel. Tips, evening dress, half-naked ladies. May I tempt you to a little more filleted lemon sole, Miss Dubedat? Yes, Dubedat. And she did bedad. Huguenot name, I expect that. A Miss Dubedat lived in Coligny, I remember. Du de la is French. Still it's the same fish. Perhaps old Mickey Hanlon of Moore Street ripped the guts out of making money hand over fist, finger in fish's gills, can't write his name on a check, think he was painting the landscape with his mouth twisted. Muakil ha ha, ignorant as a kish of grogs, worth 50,000 pounds. Stuck on the pane, 2 flies buzzed, stuck. Glowing wine on his palate lingered, swallowed. Crushing in the winepress grapes of Burgundy. Sun's heat it is. Seems to a secret touch, telling me memory. Touched his sense, moistened, remembered. Hidden under wild ferns on Hoth below us, bay sleeping, sky. No sound. The sky. The bay purple by the lion's head. Green by Drumleck. Yellow-green towards Sutton. Fields of undersea, the lines faint brown in grass, buried cities. Pillowed on my coat she had her hair, earwigs in the heather, scrub my hand under her nape, you'll toss me all. Oh wonder. Cool soft with ointments her hand touched me, caressed. Her eyes upon me did not turn away. Ravished over her I lay, full lips full open, kissed her mouth. Yum. Softly she gave me in my mouth the seed cake warm and chewed. Mawkish pulp her mouth had mumbled sweet sour of her spittle. Joy. I ate it. Joy. Young life, her lips that gave me pouting. Soft warm sticky gum jelly lips. Flowers her eyes were, take me, willing eyes. Pebbles fell. She lay still. A goat. No one. High on Ben Hoth rhododendrons a nanny goat walking sure-footed, dropping currants. Screened under ferns she laughed warm-folded. Wildly I lay on her, kissed her, eyes, her lips, her stretched neck beating, woman's breasts full in her blouse of nun's veiling, fat nipples upright. Hot I tongued her. She kissed me. I was kissed. All yielding she tossed my hair. Kissed, she kissed me. Me. And me now. Stuck, the flies buzzed. His downcast eyes followed the silent veining of the oaken slab. Beauty. It curves. Curves are beauty. Shapely goddesses, Venus, Juno, curves the world admires. Can see them library museum standing in the round hall, naked goddesses. Aids to digestion. They don't care what man looks. All to see. Never speaking. I mean to say to fellows like Flynn. Suppose she did Pygmalion and Galatea, what would she say first? Mortal. Put you in your proper place. Quaffing nectar at mess with God's golden dishes, all ambrosial. Not like a tanner lunch we have, boiled mutton, carrots and turnips, bottle of Allsop. Nectar imagine it drinking electricity, God's food. Lovely forms of women sculpt Junonian. Immortal lovely. And we stuffing food in one hole and out behind, food, chyle, blood, dung, earth, food, have to feed it like stoking an engine. They have never looked. I'll look today. Keeper won't see. Bend down, let something fall, see if she. Dribbling a quiet message from his bladder came to go to do not to do there to do. A man and ready he drained his glass to the lees and walked, to men too they gave themselves, manly conscious, lay with men lovers, a youth enjoyed her, to the yard. When the sound of his boots had ceased Davy Byrne said from his book. What is this he is? Isn't he in the insurance line? He's out of that long ago, Nosy Flynn said. He does canvassing for the Freeman. I know him well to see, Davy Byrne said. Is he in trouble? Trouble? Nosy Flynn said. Not that I heard of. Why? I noticed he was in mourning. Was he? Nosy Flynn said. So he was, faith. I asked him how was all at home. You're right, by God. So he was. I never broach the subject, Davy Byrne said humanely, if I see a gentleman is in trouble that way. It only brings it up fresh in their minds. It's not the wife anyhow, Nosy Flynn said. I met him the day before yesterday and he coming out of that Irish farm dairy John Wise Nolan's wife has in Henry Street with a jar of cream in his hand taking it home to his better half. She's well nourished, I tell you. Plovers on toast. And is he doing for the Freeman? Davy Byrne said. Nosy Flynn pursed his lips. He doesn't buy cream on the ads he picks up. You can make bacon of that. How so? Davy Byrne asked, coming from his book. Nosy Flynn made swift passes in the air with juggling fingers. He winked. He's in the craft, he said. Do you tell me so? Davy Byrne said. Very much so, Nosy Flynn said. Ancient free and accepted order. He's an excellent brother. light, life and love, by God. They give him a leg up. I was told that by well, I won't say who. Is that a fact? Oh, it's a fine order, Nosy Flynn said. They stick to you when you're down. I know a fellow was trying to get into it. But they're as close as damn it. By God, they did right to keep the women out of it. Davy Byrne smiled. Dion nodded all in one. I chotch. There was one woman, Nosy Flynn said, hid herself in a clock to find out what they do be doing. But be damned, but they smelt her out and swore her in on the spot a master mason. That was one of the St. Legers of Doneraile. Davy Byrne, sated after his yawn, said with tear-washed eyes. And is that a fact? Decent quiet man he is. I often saw him in here and I never once saw him, you know, over the line. God Almighty couldn't make him drunk, Nosy Flynn said firmly. Slips off when the fun gets too hot. Didn't you see him look at his watch? Ah, you weren't there. If you ask him to have a drink first thing he does, he outs with the watch to see what he ought to imbibe. Declare to God he does. There are some like that, Davy Byrne said. He's a safe man, I'd say. He's not too bad, Nosy Flynn said, snuffling it up. He's been known to put his hand down too to help a fellow. Give the devil his due. Oh, Bloom has his good points. But there's one thing he'll never do. His hand scrawled a dry pen signature beside his grog. I know, Davy Byrne said. Nothing in black and white, Nosy Flynn said. Paddy Leonard and Bantam Lyons came in. Tom Rochford followed frowning, a plaining hand on his claret waistcoat. Day, Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Burn. Day, gentlemen." They paused at the counter. "Who's standing?" Paddy Leonard asked. "I'm sitting anyhow," Nosy Flynn answered. "Well, what'll it be?" Paddy Leonard asked. "I'll take a stone ginger," Bantam Lyons said. "How much?" Paddy Leonard cried. "Since when, for God, sake?" "What's yours, Tom?" "How is the main drainage?" Nosy Flynn asked, sipping. For answer Tom Rochford pressed his hand to his breastbone and hiccuped. "Would I trouble you for a glass of fresh water, Mr. Stately?" Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Burn?" He said. "Certainly, sir." Paddy Leonard eyed his alemates. "Lord love a duck," he said. "Look at what I'm standing drinks to. Cold water and ginger pop. Two fellows that would suck whiskey off a sore leg. He has some bloody horse up his sleeve for the gold cup." A dead snip. "Zinfandel is it?" Nosy Flynn asked. Tom Rochford spilt powder from a twisted paper into the water set before him. "That cursed dyspepsia," he said before drinking. "Bread soda is very good," Davy Byrne said. Tom Rochford nodded and drank. "Is it Zinfandel?" "Say nothing." Bantam Lyons winked. "I'm going to plunge 5 bob on my own." "Tell us if you're worth your salt and be damned to you," Paddy Leonard said. "Who gave it to you?" Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom on his way out raised 3 fingers in greeting. "So long." Nosy Flynn said. The others turned. "That's the man now that gave it to me," Bantam Lyons whispered. "Per white," Patty Leonard said with scorn. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Byrne, sir, we'll take 2 of your small Jamesons after that and a stone ginger," Davy Byrne added civilly. "Aye," Patty Leonard said. "A sucking bottle for the baby." Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom walked towards Dawson Street, his tongue brushing his teeth smooth. "Something green it would have to be, spinach, say. Then with those Röntgen rays searchlight you could." At Duke Lane a ravenous terrier choked up a sick knuckly cud on the cobblestones and lapped it with new zest. "Surfeit," returned with thanks, having fully digested the contents. "First sweet then savory." Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom coasted warily. "Ruminants. His second course. Their upper jaw they move. Wonder if Tom Rochford will do anything with that invention of his? Wasting time explaining it to Flynn's mouth. Lean people long mouths. Ought to be a hall or a place where inventors could go in and invent free. Course then you'd have all the cranks pestering." He hummed, prolonging in solemn echo the closes of the bars. "Don Giovanni, a Saint Artico. M'invitasti. Feel better. Burgundy. Good pick-me-up. Who distilled first? Some chap in the blues. Dutch courage. That Kilkenny people in the National Library know I must. Bear clean closes tools waiting in the window of William Miller, plumber, turned back his thoughts. They could, and watch it all the way down, swallow a pin sometimes come out of the ribs years after, tour round the body changing biliary duct spleen squirting liver gastric juice coils of intestines like pipes. But the poor buffer would have to stand all the time with his insides entrails on show. Science. Asenar Tico. What does that Tico mean? Tonight perhaps. Don Giovanni, thou hast me invited. To come to supper tonight. The rum-dum. Doesn't go properly. Keys. 2 months if I get an etitu. That'll be £2.10 about £2.08. 3 Hines owes me. 2.11. Prescott's Dyeworks van over there. If I get Billy Prescott's ad, 2.15. 5 guineas about. On the pig's back. Could buy one of those silk petticoats for Molly, color of her new garters. Today. Not think. Tour the south then. What about English watering places? Brighton, Margate. Piers by moonlight. Her voice floating out. Those lovely seaside girls. Against John Long's a drowsing loafer lounged in heavy thought, gnawing a crusted knuckle. Handy man wants job. Small wages. Will eat anything. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom turned at Gray's confectioner's window of unbought tarts and passed the Reverend Thomas Connellan's bookstore. Why I left the Church of Rome. Bird's nest. Women run him. They say they used to give pauper children soup to change to Protestants in the time of the potato blight. Society over the way Papa went to for the conversion of poor Jews. Same bait. Why we left the Church of Rome. A blind stripling stood tapping the curbstone with his slender cane. No tram in sight. Wants to cross. Do you want to cross? Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom asked. The blind stripling did not answer. His wall face frowned weakly. He moved his head uncertainly. You're in Dawson Street, Mr. Stately. Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom said. Molesworth Street is opposite. Do you want to cross? There's nothing in the way. The cane moved out trembling to the left. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom's eye followed its line and saw again the dyeworks van drawn up before Drago's. Where I saw his brillantined hair just when I was. Horse drooping. Driver in John Long's. Slacking his drouth. There's a van there, Mr. Stately. Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom said, but it's not moving. I'll see you across. Do you want to go to Molesworth Street? Yes, the stripling answered. South Frederick Street. Come, Mr. Stately. Plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Bloom said. He touched the thin elbow gently, then took the limp seeing hand to guide it forward. Say something to him. Better not to the condescending. They mistrust what you tell them. Pass a common remark. The rain kept off. No answer. Stains on his coat. Slobbers his food, I suppose. Tastes all different for him. Have to be spoon-fed first. Like a child's hand, his hand. Like Millie's was. Sensitive. Sizing me up I dare say from my hand. Wonder if he has a name. Van. Keep his cane clear the horse's legs, tired drudge get his doze. That's right. Clear. Behind a bull, in front of a horse. Thanks, sir. Knows I'm a man. Voice. Right now? First turn to the left. The blind stripling tapped the curbstone and went on his way, drawing his cane back, feeling again. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned. Bloom walked behind the eyeless feet, a flat-cut suit of herringbone tweed. Poor young fellow. How on earth did he know that Van was there? Must have felt it. See things in their forehead perhaps, kind of sense of volume. Weight or size of it, something blacker than the dark. Wonder would he feel it if something was removed. Feel a gap. Queer idea of Dublin he must have, tapping his way round by the stones. Could he walk in a beeline if he hadn't that cane? Bloodless pious face like a fellow going in to be a priest. Penrose. That was that chap's name. Look at all the things they can learn to do. Read with their fingers. Tune pianos. Or we are surprised they have any brains. Why we think a deformed person or a hunchback clever if he says something we might say. Of course the other senses are more. Embroider. Play baskets. People ought to help. Work basket I could buy for Molly's birthday. Hates sewing. Might take an objection. Dark men they call them. Sense of smell must be stronger too. Smells on all sides, bunched together. Each street different smell. Each person too. Then the spring, the summer, smells. Tastes? They say you can't taste wines with your eyes shut or a cold in the head. Also smoke in the dark they say get no pleasure. And with a woman, for instance. More shameless not seeing. That girl passing the Stewart Institution, head in the air. Look at me. I have them all on. Must be strange not to see her. Kind of a form in his mind's eye. The voice, temperatures, when he touches her with his fingers must almost see the lines, the curves. His hands on her hair, for instance. Say it was black, for instance. Good. We call it black. Then passing over her white skin. Different feel perhaps. Feeling of white. Post office. Must answer. Fag today. Send her a postal order 2 shillings, half a crown. Accept my little present. Stationer's just here too. Wait. Think over it. With a gentle finger he felt ever so slowly the hair combed back above his ears. Again. Fibers of fine straw. Then gently his finger felt the skin of his right cheek. Downy hair there too. Not smooth enough. The belly is the smoothest. No one about. There he goes into Frederick Street. Perhaps to Levinston's Dancing Academy piano. Might be settling my braces. Walking by Doran's public house he slid his hand between his waistcoat and trousers and, pulling aside his shirt gently, felt a slack fold of his belly. But I know it's whitey yellow. Want to try in the dark to see. He withdrew his hand and pulled his dress to. Poor fellow. Quite a boy. Terrible. Really terrible. What dreams would he have, not seeing? Life a dream for him. Where is the justice being born that way? All those women and children excursion bean feast burned and drowned in New York. Holocaust. Karma they call that transmigration for sins you did in a past life. The reincarnation met him pike hoses. Dear, dear, dear. Pity, of course. But somehow you can't cotton onto them some way. Sir Frederick Falconer going into the Freemasons' Hall. Solemn as Troy. After his good lunch in Earl's Fort Terrace. Old legal cronies cracking a magnum. Tales of the bench and assizes and annals of the Bluecoat School. I sentenced him to 10 years. I suppose he'd turn up his nose at that stuff I drank. Vintage wine for them, the year marked on a dusty bottle. Has his own ideas of justice in the recorder's court. Well-meaning old man. Police charge sheets crammed with cases get their percentage manufacturing crime. Sends them to the right about. The devil on moneylenders. Gave Reuben J.A. great straw calling. Now he's really what they call a dirty Jew. Power those judges have. Crusty old toppers in wigs. Bear with a sore paw. And may the Lord have mercy on your soul. Hello, placard. Miras Bazaar. His Excellency the Lord Lieutenant. 16th. Today it is. In aid of funds for Mercer's Hospital. The Messiah was first given for that. Yes. Handel. What about going out there, Ballsbridge? Drop in on Keys. No use sticking to him like a leech. Wear out my welcome. Sure to know someone on the gate. Mr. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Bloom came to Kildare Street. First I must. Library. Straw hat in sunlight. Tan shoes. Turned-up trousers. It is. It is." His heart quapped softly. To the right. Museum. Goddesses. He swerved to the right. Is it? Almost certain. Won't look. Wine in my face. Why did I? Too heady. Yes, it is. The walk. Not see. Get on. Making for the museum gate with long windy steps, he lifted his eyes. Handsome building. Sir Thomas Deane designed. Not following me? Didn't see me perhaps. Light in his eyes. The flutter of his breath came forth in short sighs. Quick. Cold statues, quiet there. Safe in a minute. No. Didn't see me. After 2. Just at the gate. My heart. His eyes beating looked steadfastly at cream curves of stone. Sir Thomas Deane was the Greek architecture. Look for something I. His hasty hand went quick into a pocket, took out, read unfolded agendeth netium. Where did I? Busy looking. He thrust back quick agendeth. Afternoon, she said. I am looking for that. Yes, that. Try all pockets. Handker. Freeman, where did I? Ah, yes. Trousers. Potato. Purse. Where? Hurry. Walk quietly. Moment more. My heart. His hand looking for the where did I put found in his hip pocket soap lotion have to call tepid paper stuck. Ah, soap there I yes. Gate. Safe.
If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the channel.